the line sounds the word boy. And the Rebbe is discussing something that we, generally speaking, very few of us are familiar with this whole issue. Certainly not at the level and detail that the Rebbe is talking about it. He got involved in this because of some seeming contradiction to what we said from Torah Oir. Maybe we'll get back to this. But as a result of that, the Rebbe is explaining the significance and the difference between two principles, the principle of the parsa and the principle of the tzimtzum. In both instances, the parsa and the tzimtzum are a means to facilitate that the Oir Eliki should be able to descend and have and be able to relate to worldly level of presence, of a presence. We discussed many times what is the meaning of a worldly level. And we discussed this morning also the principal difference between world and godliness, worldly and godly. Godly has one primary definition, along with a lot of depth and so forth, but just as a point of reference. As Ram says, Motzui Rishon, a primary presence, which means a presence that does not come as a result of any kind of activity. Like we always say, in order to grasp something, in order to understand something, you have to find its boundaries. You have to find its contrast to something else. Then you understand it. There is no boundary to godliness. There is no contrast. Godliness, the presence of godliness is on a primary Motzui Rishon quality. In other words, in the simple terms, it's totally in line to say that if you understand something, really grasp it, it's already not godliness. Because godliness does not have a means to be grasped. This is why, in fact, when Eden came to Har Sinai, they realized that they have something over here that is supreme, and then how did they approach it? By saying Naaseh v'nishma. He didn't say, explain to me, and then I will do. This was a most profound recognition on their part. They wanted to relate to godliness in the true sense, to godliness per se, not to godly instructions and ideas and so forth, but to godliness per se. And that can only be in this fashion of Naaseh v'nishma. but it doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have a means, an explanation how you relate to it. It's the truth, and I know it as a truth. The only way, really, to relate to godliness is what's called Yira Shamayim. Yira Shamayim is not an intellectual recognition. Perhaps I may say that the reason it's referred to as Shamayim instead of Yiros Elikim, it is to denote for us, for our sake, to bring it closer to our mind. Just as Shamayim have no boundaries, and how do we relate to the Shamayim? Not by identifying one part of the Shamayim, another part of it, but by its all-encompassing truth, presence, omnipresence. So Yira Shamayim is inferring this in you. And that is close to the principle relating to godliness. Worldliness is by definition lacking that. The principle of world is that in fact it is a created entity. Everything in the world has a defined purpose, a defined presence. It has a present relative to other things. And its presence in the world is such that there are, as we saw this morning, there are two levels, there are two parts to a worldly presence. Oh, that's nice.
Okay. Who wants that?
Who is that?
Shlomo.
Okay. You dialed him? I'll call my friend.
Okay.
I prepared everything and I didn't dial.
Connected to mobile device.
Okay, Shlomo, I'm dialing in. I'm sorry.
Welcome to ID. Welcome. At the tone, please record your name followed by the pound key.
Abba Paltiel.
Thank you. You are participant number 2.
Want coffee?
Yeah. I apologize, I forgot to dial in. I was so excited to have such diligent students that I forgot about everything else. So therefore, to bring everything has its highest from godliness. To bring godliness into proximity of world, there has to be a whole long process. And there are two distinct, central means in this process. One is called a tzimtzum, One is called a parsa. And this is the contrast, the difference between these two is actually what we're discussing right now. We came into this as a result of some questions, but we're discussing this principle. And the Rebbe is saying, like, tzimtzum, essentially, this is so far what we have learned. Tzimtzum means that the oyer, the key, the godly presence, is actually completely hidden, removed. And some, as you said, tzimtzum causes a mokim ponui. That this mokim ponui is then illuminated with a godly presence, but it's not a direct presence, a primary presence, like the first being, Motzi Rishi, because this came after the tzimtzum. There is a sense that this first came after the tzimtzum, so there's a sense what you're receiving, what you're getting. Therefore, in tzimtzum, the essence, the godly essence, the principle that it is a fundamental reality without a beginning is lost. In the parsa is a different method. Parsa is where the oil comes, the whole oil comes through a curtain, through some kind of a camouflage. Since the whole oil comes through a camouflage, and we discussed this morning certain masholim we had for that. So there you have the very essence of the godly presence. Even though it is hidden, it is reduced in the intensity and the purity and so forth, but nevertheless you have the whole reality. On the other hand, because it is contained in this curtain. So the Rebbe explains when it contained in this curtain, it actually relates to this new environment. Like we said this morning, that it's misakif, like the motion of a person moving from one country to another country, and he's not just passing through, or actually settles in. When he settles in, he acquires the mentality and the personality of that place and the new place. If he passes through it, he still retains his original orientation. He may learn the new language, but it's the same person. But if he settles in and becomes, so to speak, acclimated, then his whole personality changes. So on the one hand, okay, enough. The point, okay, there's one thing which I want to repeat directly from this morning. The terminology, the term that the Rebbe uses is that in tzimtzum there's a complete removal of the oyer, and what comes is a ha'ora, what's called the metzias. Whereas in the parsa, there is no removal of the oyer. The whole mehus, the whole reality of the oyer, is mislavish, is imbued into the parsa. So that you, through the parsa, you have the sense of the reality of the oyer itself. In the tzimtzum, You don't have the sense of the reality, but you have its gilui, its message. So, the mashal that we used this morning to relate to the term mahus. You see this, there is a term mahus and mitzius. Mitzius means a presence. Mahus means the reality. And I'm repeating this because this is really, it's a very important concept, the chalal. You see this in human life, to recognize that there is a reality in life. What does reality mean? So I gave the mashal, I'm complete repetition from this morning, but I said I want to bring it in again. You have the mashal of a table. B'mitzius, as the table is actualized in a worldly presence, the table consists of a board and legs. This is what you see. And as such, what does the board and legs stand for? Because there is a board and leg, a board supported by legs, therefore it becomes util. It becomes useful in terms of whatever you do. You have to sit, you have to keep a book, the table will hold the book for you. This is all on the Metzias level. You also point out many times that the principle that a person is sitting in front of a table is not merely for convenience, for comfort. It is a human principle. A deep life element, neshama element in the human being. Not a high level neshama, but nevertheless it is the neshama presence in the world. This represents a certain element of the reality of the human being. What is a human being in the world? I've said many times, lahadl, animals eat, the human being eats. There is a very vast difference in the whole concept of eating as perceived by the human being and the animal, and the manner that it is executed. Like we said the other day, in the story with the Rebbe, that even a goy recognizes that he eats so that he would live. He does not eat because he is hungry. We all understand the difference. To assuage one's hunger is entirely a low-level worldly phenomenon. It's like, okay, I don't think I have to elaborate anymore. This is clear. But the principle that one eats because he wants to live, that's a completely different concept. Realization, this is not a worldly presence. Life is not per se a worldly presence. Life is a purpose of life. Life has its own purpose, not a worldly experience. Nobody lives so that he would be able to. Life is not so that he'd be able to experience worldly experiences. Rather, it is to imbue the world with life, with the quality of life, with the meaning of life. This is called the mahus. A table, after it all is said and done, that it consists of a structure, of a board with legs, it still retains a human significance. When we say that if a person does not have a table, if he eats without a table, he eats standing up, we don't say he's standing up, or he lacks the convenience of a table. He lacks the respect of a table. The status of a table. Which means the human mahus, the human reality that is expressed through all the human activities, including a table, is still retained. Using this muscle of a table, identify the mahus element, identify the parsa effect, and identify the tzimtzum effect. You ready? Yes, who's ready? Do we know what the question is?
These are two different possible explanations, or they're both occurring simultaneously?
Do we know what I'm talking about?
You already said in the morning. No, this you explained it. That this is what you're pointing out, that this what you call a human spirit that's in the table and so on and so forth, even after it's constructed out of physical material, still retains, or it could be not there. So in the case of tzimtzum, it could be right not there. That there is no human spirit behind this thing. Whereas through the parsa, it still will linger. It's something will be there. Like you will be able to perceive something. You were saying.
Yeah, well, that's yes. Okay. So in this instance, we effectively have two parts, and we can identify what the Rebbe is talking about over here. The two types of effect: the effect of the parsa and the effect of the tzimtzum. The effect of the parsa will talk first. It's like we said, that even after that the concept of a table has been translated into a physical entity that has a practical presence, practical usage, a tangible usage, it still retains some of the spirit that initiated some of the human spirit that initiated it. But clearly, it retains it in such a low level of spirit that it's even hard to recognize it. And it is very easy to lose sight of that and sense of it, and you say, no, it is just a convenience. Then there is the element of the tzimtzum. What is the tzimtzum? I'm going to say it because we don't skip anything, but this is, I really don't know what I'm talking about. What enabled the translation of the, I said, for the human spirit, human respect of a table, to translate it into a board and four legs?
What enabled that step down?
Right. What enabled to see it from that angle? To see it from that angle, you have to be completely oblivious to the human element and go down to the utility element.
To what? To build it, you're saying?
To even conceptualize it.
Why do you have to be oblivious? I thought the opposite. You have to have the vision in mind, and then you can formulate it on this low level.
Because if you have the spirit in mind, the spirit does not lend itself to be translated in physical terms.
Oh, it's sort of too overwhelming. It won't
It's
allow...
it's a completely different world.
Okay.
In order to translate it and to represent in a physical level, you have to be completely, you have to have a total tzimtzum, so to speak, and speak in practical terms.
Remove the reality.
Remove the reality element.
Keep the
Exactly.
message. Keep the message.
When you have guests and you serve them dinner at the table, your primary aim is that they should be comfortable, not that they should retain their human spirit, their human respect. You're serving on the table because it's the only way that things will be comfortable, accessible. And each one will have his own plate and his own place and so forth. So that the initial spirit, like I say, there is the Gemara's expression is that a person can be eating like a kelev. This is not why you're serving them on a table, so that they would not feel that they're clothing. They're serving on the table because it's comfortable. All right. All right.
Is that the level of Nasa? Of the Nasa of the Mishkan?
We'll have to come back to this. In a sense, this is what it means. Now it's okay. We'll have to come back. Okay, so we're on the line that begins with the word boy. And I said it's in the middle of the top section on the page Kufa and Ches or whatever it is. The Alkei Nikro Ho'er She'achar parsa. Thus, this explains why the oil that comes after the parsa, B'Shem oil shel tulda, it has the description. It's called oil shel tulda, an oil of it's an offspring, which means of a secondary level. Shehu mahus acher, which means it's a totally different reality. Legabe ho'er shel amar mea parsa, in comparison to the oil that is above the parsa. This is discussed elsewhere.
It's interesting, right? Because Rebbe himself was saying that it's the same mahus, but it's so different that it's called different mahus.
Right, because what happens is that's what he explains. Even though it's the same mahus, but this mahus is mislabesh in the parsa, like in our motion. The same idea, but it's mislabesh in an entity. And now it's translated as part of the entity rather than the idea where it flows from. So what comes after that is of a secondary nature. Oh, yes, it has that idea also.
Mm-hmm.
But primarily this is something else.
Mm.
Rabbi Paltiel?
Yeah.
You're saying this is what happens with the parsa. So this is saying that this begins this phenomenon of a different mahus. This begins as it goes from Atzilus to Biyah. There's no parsa before Atzilus, right?
Right.
Atzilus is getting the whole whatever it is without any kind of a parsa.
Right, the tzimtzum.
It gets it from the tzimtzum.
Right.
Where this that we're talking about now starts is at the beginning of Biyah.
Right. So, to elaborate on this principle which we discussed this morning, Atzilus means it stays close by to its source, regardless of the fact that it went through a tzimtzum. It does not claim its own identity. Its identity is that of its source. Atzilus and Bria are generally denoted as Chochmah and Bina. Even though Atzilus has all 10 spheres, but generally all 10 spheres in Atzilus are contained within the Chochmah. Bria, all 10 spheres are essentially contained within the Bina. The difference between the Chochmah and the Bina is like sight versus hearing.
Eventually you'll have to work around me, okay?
Sight versus hearing. So I'll start from the hearing, and then we'll be able to understand the sight. Sight is more elusive. When you hear something, and you know exactly what was being said, you know exactly the whole description and the whole presentation of what is being explained. The way you know it is that you are recreating it in your own mind. Which means it is not what originally was identified and what originally was given to you. You have to hear it, recreate it in your own mind, make sense of it, and that's when you have it. So even though you were given the whole concept, that's called the mahus, the whole explanation, the whole idea, nevertheless, is given into your idea in a way that you should be able to understand it. And then you understand it. You take it, so to speak, with your own sense of understanding, your own chushim, with your own talent. And then translate it, then becomes your understanding. That understanding of what was given to you are vastly different. Because you understand it on the basis of what makes sense to you. Not on the basis of what made sense to the teacher or whatever actually happened. This is called the parsa. So therefore, that there is oir in this understanding. You also have a sense of the reality. But it's called oir shel tulda. It means a reflected oir, a reborn, recreated oir. Because first it has to become part of your mind, and then you also sense a need of it. Now, in contrast, in sight. In sight, what you see never becomes your absorption. You don't absorb what you see. You see it in its place, in its reality. On the other hand, what do you see? You see it's a chitzonis, its appearance. You don't know it's you're not getting its intricate meaning and its a deeper significance, so to speak, how it operates internal to itself. You're not involved in it. But nevertheless, you see its fundamental truth as it is. This is called a tzimtzum. Just as, for example, in order to see, you have to have light, but you can't have overpowering light. If you have overpowering light, then you don't see. The light has to be reduced, taken away, and allowed you to see the object, not just the light. But when you see the object, you see the object the way it is. You don't translate it in your mind. This is what I have seen. This is what it is. Therefore, what you see inside, you see not what you are taking, but what is being presented. You understand the difference? It's a very important principle. This is why we say that in sight we relate to the truth. Because you relate to the object just the way it is being presented. You don't translate it in your mind. Make sense of it and then you see it. Like we said this morning, I think we said this morning, if you see a table in a room, which means the table has a context, it's in the dining room, you don't see the table at all. You see the room that contains the table. Because it makes perfect sense. It is part of its reality. Even though you see the table. But you see the way the table is being presented to you by the reality of the room. In Bina, it would be like seeing the table out of context. In the showroom. Oh, okay, I know what I can do with it. So on the one hand, you see, you have a sense of the reality of the table. On the other hand, it's at a secondary level. It's the way you perceive it, not the way it is presented, because the reality of the table really is real only when it is in the context of the room, not by itself. But here you're taking it out of context. And you see it in your own way. So, what am I trying to do over here? You have some beer?
Akiva wants to share his with you.
No, I don't need beer. I have to reward the guys, for suffering. At least you have a glass of beer.
Makes it a little less painful.
Ms. Paltiel?
Yes.
All right, so let me just ask you this last piece about in context, without context. Without context is like the pure thing. Where does the context come in? With understanding or not?
No.
With understanding, there's no context?
With understanding, there is a context on a secondary level. Okay, this is the table. Okay, what do I do with it?
So, in without the context, with sight, there's definitely the context, right?
Yes.
So where do we get to the point where it's hearing? Hearing is, yes, there's a context, but it's only secondary?
Hearing is where somebody who is looking in the room and he describes to you what's going on in the room. And he tells you there's a table, and the table stands in this and that area, and there.
So what is the nimshal for where there's no or the mashal for where there's no context at all? It's just a table as a pure no context table. What's
the
that?
person who is listening to it does not see the context at all.
Uh-huh.
He is listening. Oh, it's a table. Oh, yeah, I know what I can do with it. I have a place in my kitchen.
So there is no way to describe a context.
That's right.
To someone who hears.
Yeah, you can describe it, but it's never. You cannot present it that like Rebbe presents it, like sight presents it.
So,
In other words, reality cannot be translated in words. Yeah.
in our world, we are using both. We're using both
The
Atzilus and the Biyah.
Right. Yeah. Within our
Yes.
overall stage.
But what's the point here with respect to how it's different in Atzilus and Biyah? Atzilus is seeing, and Biyah is hearing.
Right.
Atzilus is Chochmah, and Biyah is all starting with Bina down.
Right. So the Rebbe explains. It says that the way the oil comes into Atzilus is through a tzimtzum. The way the oil comes into Biyah is through the parsa.
So I don't. This Atzilus is through the Tzimzum, and Tzimzum is saying the whole principle is missing, right? Whole principle was taken away, and yet in Atzilus you have this what we use as emotional for a sight, that you could see clearly reality as it is, without. So how is it a product of a Tzimzum? Where it should be like total removal of original light.
Just like the tzimtzum consists in the fact that in the ear you see, but you don't know what you see.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
The same thing is in Chochmah. It comes as a spark, but you don't know what you're seeing. And when it comes into Bina, then you decipher it.
Mm.
And the reason you see it is because it's true in of itself, because of the source, not because of itself.
Mm. That's what he's saying here before, that in Tzimzum, through the in Tzimzum there is more of a light,
Right,
right?
right.
Well, was this flowing from the thought that nonetheless we have the essence of the light?
Ultimately, that's what we are coming to. All right.
I'm not sure that still that I get, like, you're saying in Atzilus you have in sight, you see it, but you don't really know what you see. But yet you have a context. You have to have a context always, even in sight. Otherwise, you're not seeing anything.
On the contrary, in sight you have it in context.
In context.
Right,
But you don't know what it is.
right.
So that's like the chairs getting swallowed up by the room.
Right. It doesn't even get swallowed over. It's just that it's part of the bigger reality.
Without even knowing what that reality is.
Right.
What's the mile of that? We're dry land creatures. We're supposed to know what's happening.
All right. So let's go inside and we'll identify it. Let's try to identify. Okay. Okay. Let's go inside. Parsa. B'shem Eishel Tulda. The oil after the parsa is called Eishel Tulda, which means a secondary oil, reborn oil. Shehum Hus Acher, which is of a different reality, Legabe Hoeshel Amala parsa, relative to your which are above parsa. We said this morning, this is like the light of the sun reflected from the moon.
Mm-hmm.
It's mamish the same light, but it's reflected from the moon, and we properly call it moonlight rather than sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we call it moonlight? Because it's been so profoundly transformed, affected by the moon. And this light belongs to the moon. So it's not even a light of the sun. It's called moonlight.
Didn't the moon absorb the light? And now it is from the moon.
It's not from the moon. The moon does not absorb the light. The moon deflects the light.
Oh. It reflects?
Deflects.
What's the difference?
Or either there's a difference or there isn't. If there's no difference, so it's the same thing. But you got the message.
Well, deflect is like you block it.
What?
Deflect means block. Reflect means like you shine like something in a mirror.
Okay, what do you think the moon is? Deflecting or reflecting?
I don't know. I thought it said in Torah that it absorbs the light and then it gives it off from itself.
The moon is a dark piece of rock. It's not a diamond.
Okay.
So does it deflect or reflect? You ask me what's the difference, but you know what the difference is. If it were a mirror, there would be sunlight. It would not be moonlight. Did you ever play with a mirror in sunlight? You could cause a piece of wood to burn by deflecting, just by reflecting the sunlight.
used to do that as children.
That's right. That's why I said, did you ever play with the mirror in sunlight?
With a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
It's even worse. All right, let's continue. So that's the parsa. It's oishel tulda. So, even though it is, so to speak, you have the real reality there, but it has been transformed, and now it has oishel tulda to a secondary level. The tzimtzum, but then the tzimtzum hagam shezehu hefsek godel. Although that the tzimtzum represents a very great interruption. From the perspective that the oil has been completely ne'elam. Ne'elam means absent. And hadora means really removed completely. There's no oil. Yet still. Then the gili that comes after, Harehu alidei shechoizer omeir. The gili that comes out after, it comes alidei as a result, shechoizer omeir, that it comes back and it illuminates again, b'bchinas kiruv, in a close-up manner, loy b'bchinas akova, kanal. Not with the akov. What does akova mean? So we explained before. Akova means, like in bina, that which you understand in bina becomes part of the bina seichel. It is not what was given; it is what you took, what you were able. Like we said, you become a citizen in the place that you have passed in. That's with akov. It acclimates there. Whereas when you have the tzimtzum and then you have chozer umeir, the chozer umeir, when it comes back and it illuminates again, then it is the illumination, the renewed illumination comes from the source, and it remains close to the source. Not in akova, it doesn't become part of the tzimtzum. So, we'd like to understand it translate it in our motion. Coming back to our classical table. In order to produce a table, we said you have to be a complete tzimtzum. In other words, you can't translate, you can't work with the spirit, the human spirit, and create a table. You have to become a carpenter and know how to build a piece of furniture and design a piece of furniture. Then after you see now a piece of furniture. You go to the store and you see a table. And you consider buying the table. Would you consider to buy the table? The entire spirit behind the table comes back to you, says, oh yeah, I can relate to this. Even though now it is a mitzvah, a separate mitzvah. But then when you're trying to recreate it in a different world, in already a world in a context and so forth, but when you're recreating it, you refer back to the source of this. If I brought this table into my home, it would really look like a human home. Be very pleasant. It would be inspiring. So then, you are actually rekindling the original light from which was completely removed in order to build this table. You are bringing it back, and now it stays related to its source. In other words, you're not thinking in terms of the four legs and the table and the board when you buy it. You're thinking in terms of the reality of a table. So this reality of a table is not something that has been translated in your seichel. This is something which you draw back from the deepest human sense of human respect. This is what we're saying over here.
This is tzimtzum or parsa?
This is tzimtzum. The complete tzimtzum, in order to build a table, had to be complete tzimtzum, like I said before. But then when you go and you bring it into your home, why? Because you sense the human necessity of it, not the board and legs.
This you could sense this through tzimtzum, or that sounds like
No, that you go back to the source. That's what we're saying. After the tzimtzum, Chazer Omeya, the original oil from before the tzimtzum is rekindled.
That's all part of the tzimtzum process. It's the next step.
That's the next step.
And that's distinct from parsa, where you have the sense of the mahus.
Right. In parsa you have the sense of the mahus, but in a completely different environment. Whereas here you go back to the source.
It's not reconstructed like it is in parsa.
Right.
This you get by virtue of the chosim ha'ir.
Yeah. B'chinas kiruv, lei b'chinas akova. B'chinas kiruv means it stays close to the source, not akova where it settles into the new environment. When you come into a person's home, you don't say it's a convenient home, you say it's a beautiful human home, human environment. It brings back the human spirit. Ve'al kein, and for this reason, ha'gilu she'achar ha'tzimtzum, the gilu that comes after the tzimtzum, harehu me'ein, hoir in sof shelifnei ha'tzimtzum. It is me'ein of a similar quality, the similar depth and brightness of the oir in sof shelifnei ha'tzimtzum. Of the Ein Sof that was before the tzimtzum. Shuhu gam ken bebchinas Ein Sof. Because at this point it is also b'chinas, even though it's after the tzimtzum. For this oil comes back, it has an Ein Sof quality, it's b'chinas Ein Sof, because it goes back to the source.
This answers Baruch's question about what you're left with.
They said, yeah, that's what we're left with. We're not left, we're recreating it from the top.
This is what he wanted to know, what a dry land creature can. How does he function?
Oh, right. That's it. Gam yesh boyach. Okay, we are pursuing weiter. Gam yesh boy koyach atzmos. And in this oil that is chosev v'heir, it is b'chinas ein sof, and in it there is also the koyach of the atzmos. The K'meshe Kosev begins HaKodesh Hanal, and as it says in here, the oil HaKav Hum Eil HaMoir, that the Kav has a quality of Me'ein HaMoir, like oil Me'ein HaMoir, Hu Bechinas Mehusa V'Atzmus, which is Mehusa V'Atzmus, which is Atzmus itself. In other words, it has a quality of etzem. I don't think we want to go into this at this point. But this is like the conclusion of the whole discussion. To the extent shegam ho'el k'meshe mislavish bekelim b'atzilus, even the oil as it is in kelim b'atzilus, arei v'b'chinas in spo, and so with the pashtus, that even though it's in kelim, but it has an element of Ein Sof. V'yihu begarmei yichad, and it maintains this power of the etzem. That yihu begarmei yichad, he, which means the etzem, the oil, and garmei and the kelim are one. And what does that mean, practically speaking? Libre bohem b'al yodom me'ayin leyesh, so that he can through the kelim we can create me'ayin yesh me'ayin, which is only within the province of the etzem. V'zehu, and that is the reason that it's possible to create yesh me'ayin lefi sheho'er hu me'ein hamo o etzem k'mishekos shom. It is because the air is actually me'ein o etzem. Beim kain, and thus, are klal is ho'er. Therefore, it comes out that klal is ho'er. The oil in general, gam k'meishu mislavish ba'atzilos, even as the oil is mislavish in atzilos in kelim the atzilos, hu b'bchinas oil atzmi has the quality of being an oil atzmi, an oil that is representing the atzmi.
Atzilus implies already the beginning of the kav?
No, Atzilus is at the end of the kav. Beginning of the kav is the ak. Okay, you get a medal for.
The walls of Akudim Nekudim, these walls of Akudim Nekudim, are they above the line or kav, or they're within the kav?
No, they're all within the kav. After it's
all within the kav. What's the highest?
Odom Kadmon.
At the point of like where the kav starts.
Odom Kadmon, I said.
Odom Kadmon.
Ak.
Want to go there?
So, did we reach this table tonight?
Let's go.
We got this far down in the process. We got to this table.
Earlier, and then you get to try.
It's a nice table with a beer.
yeah, yeah.